Welcome to the One Hand at a Time podcast. I'm your host, Chris Welton, and today I've got a special guest, guys. I was looking at what the intro should be, and there's so many things I could use to describe Brian Covey. And first and foremost, he's a husband, a father, an unbelievable person. Dude, like I could go through all the accolades and everything, super humble. And when I tell you he's my friend, I'm not saying that because he's on my podcast. I'm saying that because he genuinely has become a friend of mine. And we just wanted to do another podcast and have you guys on here and listen to us just kind of banter back and forth. Because every time we just have conversations, it's like, man, we should have recorded that, dude. Like, so it's fire all the time. And Brian Covey, man, welcome to the One Hand at a Time podcast, brother.
How about it? You know what? I'll say, like, I will echo the friendship piece. And I think friendships are forged sometimes when you least expect it, and how we met, and we'll probably cover some of that. But then you find people in your life that you're like, I want more time with them, you know? And then the same is true about people that you're like, I don't want more time with them, right? And so you're obviously in the first camp. And I appreciate you sharing that as I was making decisions even this week and next week about, I'm most proud of being a dad and a husband and the family stuff. I know for you too, that's what matters in the end. All the other stuff, that's great. And that's just a byproduct.
Yeah. So let's just talk about how, I think it's important to talk about how we met first. Rene Rodriguez, and you guys all know that follow this podcast. He was my first ever guest and has become a friend of mine as well. And I don't use that term loosely. Like, I have a lot of acquaintances, but I have a small group of friends that tends to be getting a little bit bigger as I try to become a better version of myself. And so I signed up for this event in South Florida, and I'm heading down there. And I did a post real quick, put on Instagram. I'm on my way to South Florida from Orlando. And I get this guy follows me named Brian Covey. I'm like, oh, that's cool. That's awesome. Right. And I get down there and I look him up. I'm like, hey, this guy's got a lot of stuff going on. That's really cool. And then we see each other at dinner and start having a conversation. And I'm telling you guys, when you just meet somebody and you're like, dude, where has this guy been in the last 40 plus years of my life? Because I know that we've been on the same path, like mentally with the stuff we're trying to accomplish. And we were meant to be in that room together. And we just kind of hit it off from there. And we just kind of kept snowballing and multiple conversations. And we do everything we can to just have a 15-minute phone call from time to time. And it's become one of those things where I always talk about that acronym CAT, right? Change, apply, teach. So when I'm reading something like, oh, dude, I gotta text this to Brian Covey, right? Like I'll send random pictures of stuff to Brian. Brian, have you seen this yet? And it's the same thing from him. So I want to first say I truly appreciate you as a person and as a leader, and the effect you've had on my life in just like 14 months has been phenomenal, brother. Phenomenal. I mean, it's just been crazy.
Feelings the same, and you meet people like that and you're just like, okay, and you're right. And I think it's the realness. It's people that just show up, and it's like, it was said last week in a group that they want more for you than they ever want from you. And I want people in my life like that, man. They want so much for me and I want so much for them that the other stuff is like, it just comes together.
Yeah. And I think that's because we both have that abundance mindset, right? Like there's no scarcity. There's enough for everybody that wants to do the work. Right. And, you made a move recently to what seems to be a great company from what you're telling me and the research I've done. They look like a great company. It was a great fit for you. So I want to talk a little bit about that first, Brian, because anybody in our space in mortgage and real estate knows that you made a move. It was I think I got an alert on my phone. I was like, wait a minute, Brian didn't tell me that. So I text you right away. I'm like, dude, what is this? I was at like a holiday event and I get this ding that Brian Covey's moving. So I was like, I knew it had to be a good deal for you as far as the freedom and the stuff you wanted to be part of. It wasn't a monetary move because I know you as a person, you don't chase dollars. It was more of a freedom move. But if you can just kind of fill us in on that.
Yeah, so it's crazy too. Yeah, and that was one of the best kept secrets. And I always tell everybody is, I think when you do make a move, the lesson learned is like it was such a small circle that I never want to put somebody in a bad spot, especially in our industry. There's a few mentors that you mentioned, one of them, and then another one that we know. And I reached out to really just a small handful of men that I admire and look up to, and just say, hey, here's what I'm thinking, here's what's going on. And I'll tell you what prompted it is, for all of us in our journey, I had this urge almost like back in sports, I remember where I wanted to go to the next level and play in college after high school and club. And then after college, I wanted to play professionally. And you're not sure if you're ready or not for the next step. And the truth is, you probably never are 100% ready, but you just have to put yourself in the spot. And I had these desires of, I've led teams, I've had direct reports, I've been involved in all that. And I thought, well, man, what if I could be more influential in a seat at the table and really help shape the culture, the vision, the innovation, all of these things for a company that was small enough where I could make an impact, but they were big enough that it wasn't like a complete startup. I looked at that, and that for me just, that didn't fit where I am in my season of my life. And so, yeah, Revolution. And here's the deal. They weren't even on my radar a year ago. Like, truth be told, I had no idea who they were. I couldn't have told you anything about them. And then fast forward, they actually hired two of my favorite leaders on our team. And so I started to become very well aware, like, who are these guys? What is their model? What are they all about? And I started deep diving into the leadership. And I'll tell you, for all of us, I had other companies call, like I'm sure we all do, and they all felt very similar. Like our industry is going through massive disruption. People are going the broker route because they believe that's going to be best for them. And that is phenomenal for some, not for all. Some people are like, man, I'm diehard retail. I'm going to die in retail. That's just what I've known. I've been there for 20 years. They're going to stay there. And I just always thought, well, wouldn't it be cool if somebody could blend the best of both of those? Like, is that even out there? And it wasn't for the longest time. And I think a lot of what my attraction was, I knew exactly what I wanted. I knew the greatness of what companies that I had been at was, and also knew some of my friends that were in the broker model. I go, man, well, that's kind of cool too. That would be great for the consumers, great for my partners, great for growth. So in the end, what I looked at is people. I wanted to know their purpose. What are they really passionate about as they're leading this? And it was their vision for the future of not becoming a top 10 lender. I've been there and done that. But they really want to take care of their people. And we talked about why we do what we do. And in this season of my life, 2 decades in, I want to have the fruits, people that are leaders that I'm able to impact, and they go on and lead teams. And they say, you know what? As a result of being around Brian or part of Brian's team, I'm a better leader, I'm more successful, I'm a better husband or wife or spouse, whatever it is. That's what we want to create. And I believe you can do that through this amazing vehicle we call the mortgage industry. So that's why I landed. Let me tell you, 90 days in, I'm sure we'll unpack some of it. My fears, my hesitations, all the things that we all go through emotionally, I just kept coming back to what I believe and what the vision is that I hold fast to. And that's been able to really fulfill me. And at the same time, it's a driver every day of why I show up, and I go all in.
Well, all in is definitely what you do. I've been able to spend some quality time with you, and I was just in the beautiful town of Franklin, Tennessee. I hope everything's okay after those storms, but that town is, I love that little place. But I think it's important that people need to understand is that my belief and Brian's belief are in sync with, we want to help people grow and be successful beyond who we are, right? And I had a conversation with my wife this morning, and I was like, I look back at my career, and I've always been a high producer in everything I've done. But now that I look at it, it's like, I don't think people let me go do my stuff because they were afraid I was going to leave them and grow past them and held them back. And I think that's what you get a lot of places you're dealing with right now in the mortgage business or any industry. They try to trap their top producers in and tell them they're not any good to go anywhere else. For me, if I've got a guy that's crushing it and goes on to be super successful, dude, that means I did my job, right? I did my job. They're out there doing it. Maybe they'll hire me as a consultant at some point when I go into retirement or something to give me back. But I really believe that. And I know you do too, Brian. I know we both agree on that. So as you're making the move to the new company, how did you know you were going with the right people? I mean, everybody says certain things. We talk culture, which has become this, everybody uses the word culture anymore. How did you know that those people, that their core beliefs really meshed with you and it wasn't just something they were saying to get a Brian Covey to come over there? Because I know plenty of companies were just trying to get Brian Covey.
Yeah. Oh, man. Well, that's how we all feel sometimes, when you're being courted, especially right now, you're not sure if it's genuine or if it's not truly in alignment and integrity. So I'll tell you, part of my process was I did at least, 5, maybe 6 calls on Zoom and met with the two owners, and there's two other minority owners there. And then I was talking to other people. I was fortunate that I had two of our leaders that had left, our team that we had built. And I knew the culture, I knew what we were building. So I was able to ask them, what's your onboarding like? What drew you over there? What did you like? They're like, man, Brian, it's like our culture we built here, but I get to go do these things in addition to what we did. Okay, so I'm just writing all these things down as I go. I then took it the next step further and said, okay, we all get to that point where you need to, my opinion is, you need to engage in these conversations. A lot of people are like, you need to play it slow, you need to take your time. I actually believe the opposite. I believe when you get to a point where you're that intrigued and it's got your curiosity up. I spent 2 full days in person in Columbus, Ohio, and I was reading the room. I wanted to see how they picked me up. Did they do the things they said they were going to do? I mean, it's little things like, if you said you were going to pick me up at 10:30 and that was the ride from the airport, are you on time? What does your car look like? How are you dressed? How do you greet me? I'm paying attention to all the things that most people miss. And I would tell you, as you go through this, that's what you want to look at. Because look, I'm going to look at rates. I'm going to look at programs. I'm going to see the process flow. I'm going to look at P&Ls. I'm going to see all the data to back up what has been said. But I want to read people's body language. I want to hear what their vision is. What do they love about being here? What do they see for the future? What are the areas they believe they need to work on? And I also, all the while, Chris, I was assessing their strengths and weaknesses. To be real, no one's perfect, me included, right? All of us have areas we're really gifted in, and we have areas that we need to improve. And I wanted to see, where do I fit? Like, do I fit? Because I want to contribute. That's a driver for me as an achiever and somebody that's competitive. I want to see, where do I fit in this organization? What do they need? What do they see in me? And we started to map things out on the whiteboard. So a full 2 days, and we topped it off with Top Golf. I invited one of my best friends that works for another lender there who would be very unbiased. Just, he's known me for 15 years. I said, hey, why don't you come out to Top Golf with us? And 2 of the executives were there. And we just spent time. And you know this. When you're around people and you're eating and you're playing golf and you're doing this kind of stuff, you start to pick up things. And I realized very quickly, I mean, these are some people I would hang out with, just outside of the industry. Check. Number 2, I liked the conversations. They weren't negative. They weren't things that were bad about other companies. They weren't complaining about things. They were how they treat the servers and the staff. Like, all these things I'm paying attention to see, do I fit there? And so I share all that with you because there were a lot of things I went through, but that was the process and by which I left. And I knew within 24 hours when I got home and talked to my bride, here are the things I love. And she goes, man, it sounds like you're going to be really happy there. And it sounds like you would fit right into the organization and you could contribute right away. She's like, I think you'll do really well there. Then I jumped into the money and said, okay, how do we make this deal work, right? And truth be told, I took a step back. Like, I'm going to be real with you guys. I took a step back because I have saved over the years, but I know over the next 5 to 10 years, where do I want to be? Who do I want to be around? What do I want to be part of? And that for me outweighs. Sometimes we don't want to take that, what we think is a step back, to take a massive step forward. And I've done that a couple times in my career. And so I have the certainty and confidence of every time I've done that, I've grown, I've gotten better, and I've been able to contribute to people around me. And oh, by the way, money follows when you solve problems and help other people, right? So that is.
Yeah, I like to call that a step. When you don't take that step back and what you feel is a step forward, sometimes that's a step in the mud, right? Like it looks like a great foundation. I take a step in the mud. I'm like, uh-oh, now I've got to get my way out of this mud and keep moving. I want people to understand that when you're going to make a move or change something in your life, it's way more about than just the numbers. And look, I've been blessed to make a lot of money in my career. Brian's been very fortunate as well. We've been around a lot of people who've done way more than we have. Learn from us, learn from our mistakes that we've made along the way and made decisions based off of money and not money and title. I'm the guy that says, hey, call me whatever you want as long as my check's right. Okay. Like, I don't care what my title is. As long as my W-2 is what it's supposed to be, I'm okay with that. But I want to be in a place that lets me grow and lets me be who I want to be outside of just that job, because I know we've talked stories about a company you're with a long time ago, and they didn't give you the freedom that you wanted to do certain things. And I'm really happy for you, Brian. I can just see it in your eyes, man. I know you well enough to know that you're in a happy spot in a good place. right now with the move you've made. But I know it's important too when you're meeting with people and you spend that time with them. Like what we like to do is we like to take producers that we're recruiting, or I don't recruit anymore, I attract, because that's something, we'll talk about that in a minute. We take them to dinner with their spouses and our spouses, right? Like that's a move that we do because it's so important to make sure they fit and they see who we are and understand outside of that. But when you get invited to those events or go to do some more quality time with someone who's trying to attract you to come work with them, what I want you to do is listen to the language. And I don't mean profanity. I mean how they phrase certain things. And I pick it up real fast when I heard someone say something, because I want to make sure we speak the same language. And what I mean by that is, are we growth mindset? Do we have a growth mindset? Do we understand that adversity is just part of the game and adversity is a privilege, right? Like that helps me grow every time. Or are we looking for an easy way out? And the easy way is never the way that we grow through. Like it never is. And Andy Frisella will say the easiest way is the lowest paying way, right? But it's never the easy, we solve problems. You were coached by Michael Burt, and I'm reading his book right now and love him. And it's about solving problems, right? And so when you got invited into this company that is obviously making big moves, I mean, they're doing great volume. You're bringing on billions of dollars in producers. What problem did you think you could solve for them to help them continue on that path?
The number one was attracting top level leaders that could grow and scale teams that aligned up with our vision. And that's part of being a startup is you're attracting people early on that you probably look back and some of them grow with you. Some of them you look back and go, man, they just don't fit. They didn't grow with the company as they went on. And I knew right away my relationships of 20 years was the number one value add. Is I looked, and what I tell people oftentimes is what I'm going to be compensated for is not what I do over the next year or two. It's the 20 years that I've hustled and built relationships and got on planes when I didn't want to, left my family to go travel, gone to conferences, spoken, invested in myself and personal development, done stuff like Amplify with Renee. All of those things is what's really now, and I've shared this, and this isn't a brag or an ego thing. It's just to tell you, when you do it right, this is what you should expect. 90 days in, I have not made any prospecting calls yet. And we've hired $2 billion worth of production. $2 billion. Replaced the team that it took me 4 years to build. And I'll only really share that with you so you know when you're putting in the work, the results are going to follow. But I fell in love with the freaking journey of showing up on social, engaging with other people, building really meaningful relationships, and making sure that Brian of 3 years ago, the people that knew me and worked with me, probably wouldn't recognize me if I went somewhere. I mean, they would recognize me, but they'd be like, okay, there's something different about that guy. Yeah, there's something different about me. That's almost 1,000 days. You don't think in 1,000 days you could get better at your fitness, your health, your relationships, your faith, your business acumen? That's the route I'm on. So I know for a fact the reason they hired me and what I'm delivering in 90 days and will continue is attracting people that are that high level and quality that are the future of this organization, that it will raise the standard of everyone else, that they'll go, wow. I'll give you an example. We brought in our first $100 million producer. We didn't have one yet. Well, I connected with someone that came over. Larry came over from another big company we'd known in retail in Chicago. Larry comes over. Now we have a $100 million producer. We've hired our first leader that's run a $1 billion plus team. Okay, hey, Chris, we're breaking boundaries. We're breaking things that people thought, well, that's not possible. It's a startup. No, guys, we've got to think bigger, act bigger, and we're going to attract the right people. And that's how we're going to continue to grow.
Yeah, attraction is the key. And that's why in my personal, what I'm doing right now is so many different things. The podcast, I'm on social media, I'm going to events. I'm paying the price to catch up to people like Brian Covey. What I want you to understand is he said he has 20 years of experience with growth. And when someone says they've been in the business 20 years, my question to them is, have you been in the business 1 year 20 times or really 20 years? And when you talk about a startup, as soon as you started talking startup, all I could think about is how Brian Covey's the perfect face for a startup, because how tall are you, Brian?
5'9".
Brian's a 5'9" professional goalie. So he's already outperformed everybody else when he shouldn't have from the sports level based off of size alone, right? So here we are. Here's a startup from a guy who's stepping out there, who's absolutely crushed it in the soccer world, right? As an athlete, he figured out a way to not fall into that trap that a lot of professional athletes do. They slide afterwards and they end up, unfortunately, don't have any growth potential. They're just not focusing on it. And now you've taken what you've learned from there, from being considered, I mean, I would consider that an underdog at that position, not knocking you. I love you, brother. You know that. So I'm not, but in a good way. So now you're leaving Goliath, a big boy company, to go hang out with David, right? And really take that to the next level. But if you didn't hear what he said before, is their goal is not to be Goliath. Their goal is to just be really, really good and attract people that they want in their circle in their life, not recruiting them, but attracting them. And dude, I have chills right now because I'm just like, it all came together all of a sudden with me, Brian. Like all of a sudden this all just popped in. I'm like, dude, you're the perfect guy for that job. Like these guys, man, if they're not happy every morning when they get up, I don't know what to tell them. Like,
it's a great match. And I'll tell you this is when you know you fit into the organization and where you fit, there is so much more power in being part of a team that I know all of the leaders and the executives that are there, they all have unique abilities that you go, man, we complement each other. And one of our core values is collaboration. We talk about that all the time, and we want to be elite. And I think about that. I'm like, man, that's who I want to be around. People that want to be elite. And I know you said this, Chris. This is something for everybody, I think, to catch is you said something. This is what I've learned about myself over many, many years. I wish I had known it sooner. But I tend to want to face the challenge. Like growing up and being successful in soccer, but being told, hey, you're not tall enough, or you're not this, or whatever. You're not going to go play D1. You're not going to play pro. You're not going to be back on the Olympic team, all that stuff. I've just recognized myself, man, I love people to tell me it's a challenge. Like CrossFit 10 years ago. I'll never forget going in. One of my friends invites me. I can't do like 90% of the movements. And I'm like, cool, here's my next challenge, right? And there's something about knowing who you are and what drives you, again, beyond the compensation. I love a good challenge when people are looking going, what the heck is that dude doing? Why is he over there? I love the challenge, and I love to show people anything's possible when you commit and you have the right mindset and the discipline to back it up. And it paves the way for others that will come behind leaders like yourself and like me. That's what I want to inspire them is, hey, whatever that limiting belief is or you've been told you can't do, let's go do it.
Yeah. So what do you draw from in the past when we all have days where we're like, oh man, this is a tough one, right? Like it'd be easy in the mortgage business right now to look at the rates today. And if Barry Habib calls me one more time with an alert to lock, I'm just going to turn my phone off and block his number. And what do you draw from in the past? I know you're super faith-based and I understand you have a great relationship with God. We've talked about that, but I'm going to go into a couple different facets here. The first one is, what do you draw from in the past that gives you strength when you're in a time where you need that strength? Because we all need that, right? We all need to go back and go, okay, I overcame this, dude. Like this is nothing, or this is going to be the strength to push me through. What's that part first?
And one I go back to a lot lately is in our college season, we would do this Cooper test. And I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's running 2 miles in 12 minutes. It's fast, right? Like it's fast and it's 2 miles. So it's basically, for most people, almost an all-out 80 to 90% of your max capacity you're running for 2 miles. Remember, I'm a goalkeeper. Like, this is not my wheel. I'm short sprints. I'm dynamic. I jump. I dive. All these things. I'm like, okay, cool. This is the test as a freshman. And I knew I wanted to play that year. And part of what you said, my faith really does come into play there, is I'll never forget running the first year and a couple guys take off, right? There's always the people in the front, and they just look like gazelles. They run effortlessly. They're not even breathing hard at the end of it. That's not me. You know, again, 5'9", probably at that point I was 170, 175, bit muscular, but I was not a runner. And one of my favorite verses was, I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. And I would literally say that and say it out loud, audibly, as I'm running. And I would have other guys around me, right? And you're inspiring them and you're saying that and you're encouraging each other as you go through. And I'll never forget, every year I went through that, I think this is where God was preparing me to be a leader, is I was not only focused on myself, but I can remember people that were right beside me, and either I was going to pass them or they were coming up behind me and they were going to pass me, and we would start to help each other finish. And I realized a couple of lessons here. And really the reason I share it with you is, one, my faith. I lean on Bible verses and things I've read. I love Proverbs. There's so much wisdom there. Two, when you know you've completed something that was outside of your comfort zone, running at midnight, many, many nights to prepare for this and multiple times to get ready, training and completing it, but bringing other people with you and realizing life is a team sport. If you're married, you
Dude,
understand that completely. If you
life
have
is a
kids,
team
you
sport.
totally
Oh
get
my
it.
gosh. I'm going to R&D it, dude. I'm R&Ding it. That's mine. I'll give you some quotes in the footnotes, but that's,
Right? And so I just look at those things and the things I've overcome earlier in my childhood of being overweight and having, my friends going out and partying and getting into drugs and things that I shouldn't be in and overcoming that. And then later in life, in 2007, 2008, that anybody was in the business going, man, Nicole and I basically lost everything and had to start over. And by the way, if you can do the math really quickly, you realize our first two kids were born in '07 and '08. I always tell her, God has a funny sense of humor. He never gives you more than you can handle, but you will be tested beyond what you believe you can handle. And I look back now, and there were many years later that our third child came along with Henry, and it was this unique experience that was very different for me. And so I think that was really given to us to go, hey, '07, '08, you probably don't even remember having kids, being a dad. You were traveling, just trying to like make ends meet, right? Like honestly, like off credit cards, borrowing this, borrowing that, like didn't know where we were going to go next. And then I got the joy of really realizing what parenthood should be with our third. And I think those are the lessons you can look back. And so I'm so thankful we were able to have our third. And I'm very intentional with my time with our older two. And I'll end with life's a team sport. Just is. Be a great teammate, and you'll find other people will join you.
dude, it is a team sport. And I'm happy to have Brian Covey on my team. And that's a big deal. I wanted, when you hear me talk on shows I'm getting recorded on, I bring up my wife a lot. And I think we need to get our wives together because I'm sure they have similar stories. How important is that support, from your wife and your kids? As you transition, you travel a lot. And we talked before we got on the air, and we're in about limiting the travel this year, trying to pull back a little bit. But how do you, I don't like the word balance because it's almost impossible to have real balance if you're in every area. But how do you keep that relationship just flowing and you two on the same side as much as possible?
So there's two concepts I'll give you. One I learned from one of my coaches, and you imagine you're juggling all these balls in the air, right? Like call it 4 or 5 different balls in the air, and one of them's glass. And so that's the ball that you can never drop because a rubber ball will bounce back up. It's going to be resilient. It's not going to have any damage. It could drop like a soccer ball, bounce up, and it's still good. But that glass ball, if it drops, it'll breaks into pieces. And it's hard to put back together. Like maybe get some super glue, you bring things together. And I have this visual in my head all the time of as I'm making decisions and going through life, we all know that glass ball is our family. It's our spouse, it's our kids, it's the things that we hold near and dear to where we won't allow those to break. There's other things that can break in our life that we can say no to, that can even get off track for a little bit, and we'll move them back on. But I think about that glass ball, and am I protecting that glass every day as I go through? Let's be real, I'm not perfect. There's times where I say things or I lose my temper or I'm not there and I should be there. I'm just not aware of things because I'm so focused on, for those of us that are drivers and type A and all that, like I am so focused at times, I don't know what's going on around me. It's a gift and a curse because in soccer as a goalkeeper, I was so focused and playing in big stadiums and all that, and I could drown out the noise and be so focused in the moment. That's not always a good thing when you're around your family if you're not focused on them, right? So I share that because, look, that's the reality. It can be a gift if you use it right, but your strengths can also be a weakness if you don't use them in the proper way. So think about that as you go through. The second one I would tell you, man, it's an Elko quote that I've heard. I've heard Saban say it before. Ben Newman says this, is be where your feet are. And this is something I'm really aware of and I'm working on. Again, this is not perfection. This is not, man, I got it all right all the time. I will say I get it right more than I get it wrong, which is okay. That's a start. That's where I am. And being where your feet are means, hey, set your phone down and turn it off for a minute. Take that extra ride. Like last night, I was able to go to my daughter's goalkeeper practice and soccer practice. And I'll give you real life what I call the overarching principle of integration. So set balance aside, and let's talk about what integration looks like in practice. Is I'm riding with my daughter. It's about 25, 30 minutes to the practice field. So I get time with her. My phone's down. I'm talking to her. I'm checking on her day. What's happening at school? How are your grades? How are you feeling? Getting her mindset ready for training that night. When we get there, she goes off to practice. I'm not her coach. I'm not worried about that. I'm not going to sit there and watch her the entire night either. Let's be real. I'm working on some things with my running in my journey this year. There is a track around the soccer field that is not like a beautiful track or anything. It's just like a running trail, right? So I ran 5 miles while she's training at practice last night, made a couple phone calls in between, and listened to part of a podcast. That was all done integrating time together. And guess what? When I got done, I felt better. I had more energy. My conversation with Presley, with my daughter on the way home, as she's learning to drive, she's 15, we're able to talk about things. So I get almost, call it 45 minutes to an hour with her. We stopped and got some food on the way home, right? And I got my workout, my extras, my second of the day. And then I'm listening to things that are going to me. That's integration. Bring your kids along for the workout. Bring your kids along when you go somewhere. If you're speaking, I've done that last year. I took my daughter out to Las Vegas to one of the speaking events. Like,
I met
guys,
her there. I met her
right?
at that event. Yeah.
And so you probably remember this. Everyone's like, man, that's so cool. And part of me doing it was selfish. It was for me. It was for me and Presley to be together. The other part was, there was part of me that when I told Renee and some other people, they're like, dude, that is so cool. And I go, you know what? I need to be the example for others that wonder if it's okay, wonder how they're going to get more time with their family. They want more time with their family. I'm up here talking about this stuff. I'm going to show people what it means. And again, I don't get it right all the time. I'm not trying to say that. I'm giving you real tactics to where when you start to do this more often, you're going to find happiness, and I call it harmony in your life. That's what I focus on today, is where can I integrate things. And I'll give you one last example. Tonight, my daughter's got training. Our youngest son, I'm going to take him to that training while she's practicing. Instead of me running, he and I are going to do some footwork and some conditioning and just ball skills on the soccer ball together. So all of that, guys, like, you just have to be intentional about how you plan your day. I always say this. People say, I don't have time. You don't have time to waste. You don't have time to waste. So you have to be intentional in every hour of your day, or you won't have the results that you want.
No, think about that. Parents that take your kids to practice, and instead of doing that and trying to integrate stuff like Brian talks about, you're on your phone scrolling through Instagram or TikTok, getting that TikTok cave you get stuck in. You know, it's funny because my wife and I are working on hopefully adding a child to our family. And she said, you know, your speaking and stuff's going to start taking off, and you're going to need to travel more. And she's like, we're going to come with you. I'm like, done. I mean, I would love that. I'd love nothing more than that. I like hanging out and socializing at events, but boy, I sure would like to rather, instead of everybody goes out and does the drinking late or whatever, I would much rather go back to the hotel and hang out with my family or go to the pool or do whatever. So I applaud you for that. And I know that it's a constant work in progress. And what I want everybody to understand is the reason why we wanted to have this conversation today is I wanted to share some things that I already knew about Brian with everyone else. And if you don't have a Brian Covey in your life, you need to go find one, right? Find somebody that's where you want to be and try to connect with them, figure out how to get into the room with them and try to build a relationship. Brian was super receptive to me and we just clicked. Sometimes that's not going to be the case. I'm doing a call here in a little bit with another one of our friends, which is going to be just a showstopper as well, which I'm really excited about. And you can get into those rooms if you really want to. You can meet the people you want if you really want to. If you want to do the work, sky's the limit. I know everybody says that, and there's Nike commercials. Like, we are proof of that, okay? Brian's on a level where I want to get to, and I'm chasing him, and that's why he's working CrossFit so hard, because he knows I'm going to catch him because my strides are bigger than his, right? So he's in there pumping it up, and I'm coming after that. And the cool thing is when I get to Brian's level, he's going to be like, dude, let's go. Like, you know what I mean? It's not like, oh, no, we can't do that. So as we wrap things up, Brian, what would you recommend for people that want to connect with somebody that they've looked up to, or how they should go about trying to do that? and not getting caught in just the trap. And also let's talk real quick about the reinvestment in yourself, understanding that is a priority. You need to reinvest in yourself to be able to grow.
I think as I look back, all of the meaningful relationships that have really transpired the last several years of my life have all come from in person, number one. They've all come from environments where we invested to be there, time, energy, money, effort, all of these things to be in rooms. And this can be masterminds, the event we talked about that Chris and I were at with Amplify. Last week I was in Puerto Rico, and I made some amazing new relationships, right? And it happened because the setting was right. People were open and receptive to that versus these mass events that are just hundreds, if not thousands of people sometimes. Those, as I look back, those have not been the breakthroughs in relationships for me. They've been the smaller groups, typically around 25 or less, is what I'll just kind of quantify it for you. And I've spent enough money to be in a room that a lot of times, Chris, you said it. I used to believe I didn't belong in some of those rooms, and that was some negative self-talk. And then I just said, you know what, Brian, why not? Like you've done some cool things. You're equipped. You have unique gifts that God's given you. Show up in the room, be your best, just give to everybody. And if you show up with that intention, what happens is energy and hearts connect. And last week, I'll tell you an example of, it's kind of cool. I'd met someone last year in an event in Scottsdale, and we're sending notes and texts through, WhatsApp and all that. And last week, like, hey, when's everybody getting in? Let's share some rides. And I really wanted to share a ride. It was about 45 minutes from the airport to the hotel where we were staying. Well, I found an amazing leader that's at EXP. He's on his fitness journey. He's got kids, all these things there. And we had met at the previous event. I intentionally set up time to be with him in the car for 45 minutes to get to know him better, like just to listen. And let me just tell you, the next day, that relationship, you can't get that through a Zoom call. You can't get that through sliding in somebody's DMs and trying to send them something of value or schedule time with them. Cut all that noise and that stuff out. If you want to get around the right people, you need to invest the money to be in the right rooms. And when you show up, be prepared and ready for the opportunity that when you get to engage with them, listen more than you talk. Listen. And I think Dave Meltzer says this all the time, right? Is be more interested than trying to be interesting. A lot of us want to be, oh, I do this and I do that and talking about all the things, and we try to almost validate why we're in the room. No one cares. There's somebody in the room that makes more than you, more successful than you, and there's people that are less, right? When you want to use those scoreboards. The reality is you're in the room for a reason. Act like it and engage with people. The last thing I'll give you, it just happened today. We talked about sending 5 video messages a day to people in your life. And those can be people in your circle. I talk about your circle of 25. Send them videos and text messages, Chris, like you talked about. We'll text back and forth like, hey, did you see this? Hey, here's what I'm reading. When you start to add value to people on that level, man, watch how your circle grows to where you're like, dude, I'm texting with so-and-so and they respond and I've got this person. Introductions then just become easy because then guys like us are like, hey, you know what? You need to know this person. Hey, let me help you get in the room with these people. Hey, did you know about this event coming up? That's when you really know you're in a great state and a great flow. So that's how I would just break it down. Simply put, follow those steps. It's worked for me, and I've seen it work for numerous people where that is, to me, that's what changes your life right there. The people that are in your life.
I can't agree with that more. And I'll give them an example of that, a real life example. Brian and I were sitting at Golf Sanctuary. Is that where we went to lunch? Cool place. So if you're in Franklin, Tennessee, check it out. It's an amazing place. But we're having lunch, and he says, hey, do you know Brian Ward? I'm like, yeah, I know who Brian Ward is. He's got a Dad Up podcast. And he said, you need to connect with him, man. You need to connect with him. So I reach out to Brian Ward. We connect. We recorded a podcast last Wednesday. I was on his podcast. It dropped on Sunday. So it's amazing when you do meet and interact with people. They'll go, you know what? You should meet this person. This is who you should meet. And that's proof that that is actually what happens. So I want to finish off here and just say, Brian, as usual, dude, it's always a pleasure to have you on a call. I wish I lived in Franklin or you lived here because it would be even more more interaction. And I know that we're both going to be in Vegas in October, but I'm sure our paths are going to cross in person before that. You'll probably be in Orlando at some time soon as well. What's the best way for people to connect with you? Just get some advice, follow Brian. What's the best way to do that?
Yeah, hit us up on the website. It's got everything on there from the podcast to the book to all these other kind of cool stuff that I share. A lot of lessons from just the street. So if this resonated with you, then you'll want to join that because I'm dropping stuff that's real life truth. I basically document what I'm learning in conversations and push it out because I think that's how we all learn and grow. So go to www.briancovey.com. And then on Instagram, I spend a lot of time there. It's at the Brian Covey. Since someone took Brian Covey and still, funny story, they're still trying to sell it to me. So the Brian Covey, Instagram, hit me up. I do respond to all my stuff. It's me. And I'd love to connect up with you and support your journey.
Awesome, man. Yeah, check out his content, guys. I'm telling you, it's fire. He brings it every day. Tons of content on there. Great stuff to learn from. And again, reach out and follow my man, Brian. Thank you so much for tuning in to the One Hand at a Time podcast today. If you enjoyed the episode, please subscribe and share. I'm often asked if I'm available for speaking opportunities or accepting new coaching clients. The answer is yes. Feel free to click the Calendly link in the show notes to set up a 30-minute call with myself. And remember, as we move forward in life, we do it one hand at a time.